This is the perfect time of year to be talking about this kind of stuff because all these seafood shacks are just now coming into blossom. They're basically open from May until roughly October. They're wonderful places. They are, as Ann mentioned, dine in the rough places. The places I include. By the way, I'll be talking about the places that are in my Lobster Shacks book and Clam Shacks books for the most part in this presentation this evening. Dine in the rough places are places where you go and there usually aren't any waiters or waitresses, no servers. You go and order your food at a window or at a counter. You pay up, they give you a ticket or a number or something like that. You go sit down, wait for it to be called, or they bring out a plastic tray of food for you, wonderful seafood, and then you hopefully take it to a nice picnic table by the seaside somewhere and enjoy. This is a long-standing, decades-old New England tradition that's been going on for a long time, and it's one that sort of captivated me. My wife and I are from Chicago. We moved out here in 1991, and I started going to these places like in the mid to late 90s, and got the idea to do this Clam Shacks book back in 2010, and a friend of mine who owns a publishing house in Kennebunkport, Maine, foolishly agreed to do it, gave me a contract, and I started driving up and down the coast. That was the summer of 2010, did the same thing in the summer of 2011 for Lobster Shacks, and on and on and on. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun researching these books, writing them, and what we're going to do is we're going to take basically a road trip from Branford, Connecticut up to Eastport, Maine, which is right next to or across from the Canadian border. I'm going to visit a lot of places, some of which might be familiar to you, others that may not be at all. Hopefully you'll find some places you'd like to visit sometime in the future. And if you have any that you'd like to talk about at the end, I'll be happy to answer questions and hear comments from anybody on anything you want to add to the overall conversation. Okay? So, to begin, we're here in Branford, Connecticut at this lovely little Lobster Shack, aptly named in this beautiful red trailer. It's owned by Arlene Krismali and her husband, Nick. Nick was a lobsterman for many years on Long Island Sound. Then he became a clammer and just recently retired from that. It's a wonderful little place where their main dish is the hot buttered Connecticut-style lobster roll. Now, what hot buttered lobster rolls are is warm lobster meat drenched in butter, put on usually a split-top bun like this, and served as you see it here. It's different from most of the lobster rolls in the rest of New England, from basically Rhode Island north, where it's chilled lobster meat, usually mixed with a little bit of mayo and maybe a few seasonings. But anyway, Arlene does a great lobster roll here. I do have to tell you, though, that lovely trailer you saw, they lost their lease on that in Branford this past year, but they are building this place over in East Haven. Not so much a shack as it is kind of a snappy little restaurant, but it's good. I'm sure be every bit as good. It's not open yet. They're running a little behind schedule, but it's a great place to keep in mind for later this summer or certainly next year. Okay, over in Guilford, Connecticut, meet Bart and Janice Mancy. Bart is a lobsterman currently out there on Long Island Sound, one of the few remaining ones still plying the trade. As you know, the water in Long Island Sound has been warming. The lobsters are migrating north. They're heading more toward Maine, even Canada. But a lovely couple. They have a nice little dock in back of their little shed where Bart keeps his lobster traps and everything else. And they also serve a wonderful hot buttered lobster roll there as well. Wonderful thing. And the other thing you want to have if you go there, this is sort of right down in Guilford Harbor, by the way. That gives it a little more specific location. Is this great clear broth Rhode Island style clam chowder, flecked with a lot of Italian seasonings. The recipe is from one of Bart's friends, an Italian American who lives over in New Haven, and it's just a great complement to a hot buttered lobster roll if you happen to be there. Now we have the place. Does anybody know this operation in Guilford? Yes, this is a real funky, different, crazy kind of place where you sit on tree stumps at these red top tables here. One of the owner's wives brings fresh flowers, puts them on the table every day, and all the food is cooked over a 9-foot long, 4-foot wide wood-fired pit. And so it's this open flame thing. They could never open anything like this in this day and age. They've been grandfathered in for like 50 years because the smoke is coming. It's very tribal. You sort of sit out there, and it's very fun, very different. But anyway, the lobsters that they cook here, they basically steam them in pots on the edge of the fire pit, cook them most of the way through, then they throw them on for 1 or 2 minutes at the end to give them a nice, smoky, finished-off flavor. It's a great place. The other thing you want to get if you go here are their fire-roasted clams, which are just fantastic. They put them on closed. They, of course, pop open as they cook. They slather on a nice tomato and garlic sauce on each one of them, and they are fantastic. All right, getting closer to Groton here in Madison, the Clam Castle on Route 1. Nice little spot, mostly deep-fried seafood here. One of the things they're best known for are their clam strips. In an article I did recently for Yankee Magazine, I named these one of the top 10 clam strips in New England. Great thing to get when you go there, as well as their whole belly clams. And they also have some magnificent clam chowders here as well. Okay, Lobster Landing. This is in Clinton. Very interesting place. This is what you think of as a quintessential seafood shack. I mean, it's literally falling down, owned by these two very nice people, Kathy and Inia Bacci. He goes by Bacci, which is his last name. He's kind of a nutty Italian guy. He used to own a restaurant in Southbury, and on a whim bought this shack about 10 years ago and started making hot buttered lobster rolls. In my opinion, his is probably the best hot buttered lobster roll that I've had in Connecticut. It looks like this. It's chock full of fresh picked lobster meat, which is what he does there. That's very important. You don't see that a lot around here. You see it mostly in Maine, where the lobsters, are more plentiful. And that long, Italian-style sub roll, he sort of toasts on a standard issue, gas propane grill right on the premises. But it's a great place. You pay on the honor system after you're done eating and you're walking out. They do it. But highly recommended to go. It's right down by Clinton Harbor. You drive down from downtown Clinton down, I think it's Commercial Street, and it's right at the end of the road there. You can't miss it. Okay, in Old Saybrook, where my wife and I live, a couple years ago, this place popped up on my radar, Liv's Shack, a very small place. It's an offshoot of Liv's Oyster Bar, which is a very nice sort of upscale restaurant on Main Street in Old Saybrook. They serve wonderful hot buttered lobster rolls here, a little bit fancier on these brioche buns here, and they have these wonderful truffle fries that they also serve at the restaurant that are out of this world. So this is something worth checking out, and the prices are pretty reasonable. Most lobster rolls these days are going between $15 and $20 for the 4-ounce standard size lobster roll, and these are right in the middle at about $18, I believe. At this time of year, the prices should be going down a little bit because lobsters are becoming more plentiful, but we shall see. Every year it's different. Okay, this is Sue Tierney. She's the owner of Captain Scott's, which you may be familiar with, right across the river from you here. Wonderful person. She and her brother own this long, narrow, seafood shack right by the Amtrak tracks there and in the shadows of the buildings of downtown New London. They have everything there: deep fried seafood, whole lobster, lobster rolls. Here's their hot lobster roll on the left and the cold lobster roll on the right. So they do it both ways there. They also have excellent fish and chips. Really good here. This is like the small size serving for like $8.95, $9.95. For $4 more, they'll throw another piece of fish on there, but this is probably enough for anybody at any reasonable time. Okay, and then what I like to refer to as the King Kong of lobster shacks in southern New England, Abbott's Lobster in the Rough, very famous, not too far from here. Great spot, been around for about 45 years, I believe. Here is Deirdre Mears, the owner, showing off their World War II era cast iron steamers where they slow steam their lobsters. They put them in these metal trays and set them in there. It takes about 5 minutes longer than it does in most other places, but it really seals in the flavor very nicely. They also have 3 different types of lobster rolls here. They have the regular one, which is 4 ounces. Most lobster rolls are a quarter pound. The second size is the OMG lobster roll, which is 8 ounces, twice the size of the lobster roll just mentioned. And then they have this, the LOL lobster roll. This is 16, count them, 16 ounces, 1 pound of lobster meat, right? I mean, I don't know who would want to buy or eat this, and it's got to be north. I would, but it's got a price tag probably between $50 and $60. I haven't priced it recently. It's humongous, but this is enough for 2 or 3 people, I think, most of the time. But anyway, maybe mostly for show, but I'm sure some people order this. When I go there on opening day, sometimes people are always ordering 5, 6, 7 pound whole lobsters. It's a tradition with a number of people who have been going there for many, many years. Okay, on to Rhode Island. Aunt Carrie's is near the Block Island Ferry Docks. It's in the town of Narragansett on the west side of Narragansett Bay. Wonderful place. Going to celebrate its 100th anniversary next year. So this might make it the oldest clam shack in New England or any place. They're known primarily as the inventors of the clam cake, which is like a hush puppy, a nice piece of like fried dough with chunks of clam in it and flecks of onion. They also have these wonderful shore dinners in a variety of styles. This one has a lobster, of course, your steamer clams, native corn, butter for dipping, as well as some clam broth to dip the steamers into. But a good spot, probably no more than 35, 40 minutes from here. Over on the east side of Narragansett Bay, there's a couple of places I want to mention. Blount Clam Shack. Blount is a large purveyor of gourmet chowders that they make on a large manufactured level. They ship all over the world. It's very highly regarded stuff, used in many upscale restaurants, but I thought it'd be fun to open a little clam shack right across the street from there big plant and just serve up some good deep fried seafood for everybody, including their absolutely wonderful fried clams, which you see here, as well as a cup of their nice New England style clam chowder on the left. But a great place to stop. This is sort of about 15 minutes southeast of Providence, again on the east side of Narragansett Bay. Also on the east side of Narragansett Bay is this place, Evelyn's Drive-In, one of my favorite spots, by Nanaquacket Pond, a very quiet, serene place owned by these two people, Jane and Dominic Bitto. I love the sign up there I'm going to try the laser pointer for the first time. Wish me luck. Over here, if you're in a hurry, you're in the wrong place. This is a very zen-like place where you go out there, and they do serve cocktails here, but you sit on this patio out in back of this little building and just stare out at this pond all night long. The sunsets are incredible. The food is very good, and one of the crazier dishes that they have there. They have deep fried seafood, good lobster roll, and they also have this thing called lobster chow mein. Evelyn, who started this place about 40 years ago, took big chunks of lobster, put it on chow mein noodles, and poured this humi gravy, whatever that is, from up in Fall River, Massachusetts. This is about 10 miles south of there. That's probably their signature dish. But I was there last year with a friend, and we sat down to this seafood fisherman's platter for two, which is really, again, enough for 3 or 4. Believe you me, it's very expensive, but it's very good. But you can get a whole bunch of people around the table and nosh on that. You don't have to order much of anything else. Okay, out to Cape Cod. There are a lot of places on Cape Cod. I'm only going to touch on a couple of them. If you go way out, if you think of Cape Cod as being an arm like this, and you come out here and you come to Orleans down here, this is an Eastham. This is Arnold's Lobster and Clam Bar. It's on the forearm right there, so to speak. And this is a big touristy place. It has a miniature golf course. It has a large ice cream stand, but has wonderfully prepared lobster, as I will show you here in what they call a rational steamer. It's a German contraption that the owner bought from there so that he can steam the lobsters halfway through, cook like 70 or 80 at a time, halfway through, and then as people order food, parties come in and they order deep fried seafood. Some order deep fried seafood, some order lobsters. The lobsters can catch up more quickly with those orders, so people, are dining together and not sitting there, some eating, some not. A very ingenious idea, and it ends up producing wonderful lobster dinners like you see here. Very good. Just a little bit north of there, in northeastern Massachusetts, is a place called Friendly Fisherman's. Much smaller, much more quaint. A mother-daughter operation owned by Janet and Alana Dimitri here, showing off a couple of 8-pound lobsters from their tanks in their seafood market. But they have great cold lobster roll here, excellent deep-fried seafood, and a much more subdued, smaller, and more laid-back setting than at Arnold's. It's like, quite a contrast between the two, but I highly recommend both of them. Okay, and then further north, in Wellfleet and Truro and Provincetown, a guy named Mac Hay has sort of a monopoly on all the seafood shacks, seafood restaurants, seafood markets. He's a great guy. He has close personal relationships with all the local fishermen. This is his shack here where it has this wonderful piece of roof sculpture. As you're driving back from Wellfleet Harbor into town, you see this fisherman hauling in his catch right here. This particular shack right here is more of a sushi and raw bar, a little bit fancier, but he's got a dine in the rough place right down on the docks in Wellfleet. They have wonderful oysters in Wellfleet as well. They're world renowned. Okay, so from here, we're going to skip around Boston because there are a couple left in Boston, a couple seafood shacks, but most of them have grown into full-blown restaurants with cocktails and service and all this kind of stuff. We're now in Cape Ann, over northeast of Boston in Rockport, in the Bearskin Neck section. Roy Moore Lobster Company is one of the smaller and more famous places in this neck of the woods. It's owned by this guy here, Ken Porter, a real gentleman, real fun guy. What Ken does that's different from most of the other places is he's constantly cooking, steaming 1 1/4 pound lobsters. So when you walk in, if you want a lobster, you say, give me a lobster, and you get it right then. You don't sit down and wait for it for 15 or 20 minutes. And you go grab a thing of chowder. As you walk past Ken, you go out in this little small back deck there, eat, and off you go. You're all set. Now we're going to take a trip up Route 133, otherwise known in Cape Ann as the Clam Highway. Probably the best clam shacks in the world are located on this thing. And one unique thing about the places I'm going to show you, the next 3 places, is that they all use some or all animal fat in their oils. They're not using vegetable oil like most places do, which is, of course, healthier, but this stuff really ratchets up the flavor. So some of these places have a mixture of animal and vegetable oils that they use in their fryers, and one place, which you'll see in a second, uses straight out lard, which is what they have used for over 100 years. Anyway, Farnham's is the first one in this nice sort of nondescript roadhouse that you find on Route 133. Excellent fried clam strips here and fried whole belly clams. I think this is a platter of clam strips here. The next place up the road about about a half a mile, Woodman's. This is where Chubby Woodman allegedly in 1917 fried the first fried clam on July 4th weekend. And it set off this whole craze throughout New England serving this kind of stuff. Here is a scene outside their place on a Mother's Day several years ago. They have a big lobster stand out there as well. You can see that line going back there. It's a very popular place. You come here and grab your lobster, and then you take a right and you go in to order your deep fried seafood within. But my favorite place, the place that I think is the best place to go for fried clams anywhere, is the Clam Box, which is yet a little bit further down on the Clam Highway. It has this great, it was built in like 1938. A guy built it for his wife so she could have a restaurant, I guess more of a hobby than anything else at that time. And it has this open top clam box motif going here with it. What they do here, which is different from any place I've visited, is they change their oil in their fryers twice a day. So they start with fresh oil in the morning, and about 1:30 or 2 in the afternoon, they close for about 20 minutes. And you're standing, they have a sign there telling you this is going to happen, but we're changing the oil, you're going to appreciate it. And sure enough, the deep fried seafood that comes out of here, particularly the fried whole belly clams, are extraordinary. Really worth a visit to go up and see these. Any of these three places really are great, but if you had to go to just one, I would recommend this one. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, here is a sample of their deep fried whole belly clams right here. Wish I was there right now. Okay, now we're going to go scooch across the border into New Hampshire. When you go heading toward Seabrook, New Hampshire, down toward the beaches there's sort of these twin Titan shacks. I like to call them Browns. It's on the left-hand side of the highway as you're heading toward the beach, about a half a mile from the beach. On the left, on the right is Marky's. They're both on the Blackwater River, which is very tidal. It rises and falls about 5 feet every day. In fact, in Browns, they have portholes in the floor, so when it gets too crazy during a full moon time or a storm or both, they can let the water in. Of course, there's no customers in there. They wait for it to drain out. They swab the decks, and they're open again within 24 hours. And they have to think creatively in these situations. Both great places, but for a bit of a more intimate experience, you might want to try halfway up the coast. And then the New Hampshire coast is probably, about 15 miles long, something like that. Rye Harbor Lobster Pound. There is a Rye Harbor, and this little road that leads down to the harbor is this teeny little spot here that does some kind of amazing things. One of them is they have a hot buttered lobster roll, which is unusual for this part of the world. Most of them are cold rolls, like at Brown's and Marky's. But the reddish hue is due to the fact they put some sherry in with the butter, which kicks up the flavor a bit there. And then that red-hued little thing in the background there, that's Lobster Gazpacho. And they also do a lobster pizza there. So in this little shack, this woman and her father are making these incredible dishes, and it's definitely worth stopping at if you happen to be passing through. Okay, on to Maine. The Maine, here we go, getting close to ground zero of everything lobster. Anyway, and seafood. I think a lot of the best, even deep fried stuff, may be had in Maine these days. Chauncey Creek Lobster Pier is in Kittery Point, Maine, which is not right where all the shopping malls are and everything. You have to go take a side road down, and you go to Chauncey Creek, which is really a tidal inlet. And the pier is actually a pier that runs parallel to the shoreline. It's about 200 feet long. Lots of picnic tables, boaters going by, boaters hitching up, coming in, getting something to eat. You bring your own beer or wine here. By the way, many of these shacks are BYO establishments. You know, you can't bring soda in and stuff like that, but you bring any alcohol that you want and partake. It's a wonderful place where they sometimes serve up lobster by the dozen. You know, depends on how many people you have in your party. But it's a great place where people bring in tablecloths, candelabras, and all this stuff. They dress the whole thing up. You can also bring your side dishes to this place if you want to. They're just focused on selling you the seafood and letting it go at that. Okay. Now we're going to scooch up to Kennebunkport, Maine, Kennebunk technically, to the Clam Shack, and this little shack building hanging over the edge of the Kennebunk River. Anybody been to this place before? Great spot. This is, in my opinion, the best place to go for lobster rolls. This is Steve Kingston, the owner. He's perfected his recipe where he gets mostly soft shell or new shell lobsters, particularly this time of year, cooks them up by the dozens, by the hundreds actually during the daytime, has a whole fleet of college students picking the meat out of the things, putting them in little plastic containers, one lobster in each one 1.25 pound lobster in each one. And rather than putting them in a refrigerator, he puts them in these big buckets of ice cubes, and it keeps it just above freezing, doesn't dry out the meat at all, and it's incredibly succulent. He also serves it a little bit differently, again, not unlike Abbott's, on a hamburger-style bun. These are baked specifically for him in nearby Biddeford at a bakery. Nobody else has these things, and it's just really a great place to go. And this is sort of the benchmark for me and for many other people of what a lobster roll really should be. A little bit further up in Kennebunkport is a place called Noonan's Lobster Hut in Cape Porpoise. Little spot here. This is a third-generation lobster fishing family where the fathers and the sons and daughters go out in the morning, 4 or 5 a.m. They fish for lobster. They come back about noon. They take naps. They get up. They help out in the kitchen from 4 or 5 o'clock on. On the right-hand side is the dining room. Left-hand side is their little galley over there. But a great place just to have a nice whole lobster or a lobster roll. No deep-fried seafood at this particular establishment, but a great place. Cape Elizabeth, Maine. We're getting close to Portland now at this point. Biden, Maine is a trailer that was opened, I think, about 6 years ago by a couple of people. We're going to see in just a second. The reason they have about 4 different types of lobster rolls here. No whole lobsters, no deep fried seafood. It's very small, very funky little operation. But there are 2 reasons to go here. It's for their wonderful lobster rolls and for this incredible view. All right, this is the Portland headlight. You may have been there. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But these people, and keep on forgetting this, Sarah and Carl Sutton, these 2 right here, they're from, of course, Minnesota. Where else would lobster roll people be from? They're designers, graphic designers. There's a lot of graphic designers in Portland. And they came up, and on a lark, they put in for an application about 6 years ago to get a spot, for a food trailer in that park there, in Fort Williams Park. Much to their amazement, they got it. So they started coming up with these recipes for lobster rolls. And they hit it on the head. They've done very, very well. They have 2 or 3 other operations. One at the Allagash Brewery, just outside of Portland. Another one in a little storefront in Scarborough. It's the first town south of South Portland. But they do really good stuff. And here is one of their types of lobster. This is their main lobster roll, which is the cold lobster roll with a little bit of mayo mixed in, some chives thrown on the top. They also have one like this. It's called the picnic lobster roll. Basically the same thing with a layer of coleslaw underneath, which isn't so bad. And they have warm buttered Connecticut roll here as well. So they're kind of covering all the bases. One that has a little bit of curry mixed in with the mayo, which might sound, but they do it in such a way that it's very, the difference is very discreet and very nice, I think. Okay, in downtown Portland, you might want to go to Portland Lobster Company, which is right on the commercial docks, right there in downtown Portland, where you can get any and all kinds of seafood. They have a bar also to the left with live music going during the evenings every night in the summertime. Get wonderful shore dinners like this. Just sit out there and enjoy it. And now we're going to go from Portland to Midcoast Maine. What Midcoast Maine is it's sort of geographically, it's a bunch of fingers jutting south down into the Gulf of Maine. So you have these long pieces of land where you drive down your car from here, you drive back up, you go on Route 1 over to the next one, you drive down, back up, and there's like 4 or 5 of them. All very interesting, all very different. You could actually get, if you had a boat, around much quicker than you could by car. But it's great driving down these little things. Not only are there lobster shacks, but there's also little artisan galleries, coffee shops, little farms, all different kinds of things. Five Islands Lobster Company is in the town of Georgetown. It's literally at the end of Route 128. The road literally goes off their dock right there, which is the town dock. And I think, in my opinion, this is probably the best pure lobster shack that you can go to any place. One of the reasons is that it's on Sheepscot Bay, which is deep. The water's cold. The lobsters are big. They're lively. They're very tasty. And they come in off the boat 5 or 6 times a day. They just keep offloading these things all the time. Really, really good stuff. Very good. Also, wonderful fried clams here. Just a wonderful place to go and sit and stare out at these 5 islands, which are literally out there in the bay. Little pine trees on them, a couple little houses and things like that. But, come for the scenery, stay for the food, or vice versa. Either way, it's a great spot. Okay, Red's Eats. Anybody been here? This is a very well-known place. Very well-known place. They have an excellent large lobster roll here. Okay, they also have great fried clams. That's the good news. The bad news is what you sort of see going off to the right here. The line. The line here is dreadful. And as my wife will tell you, I hate standing in line. On any given summer day, you'll be in this line for at least an hour and maybe even 2 hours waiting to get their lobster roll, and people are willing to do it. You drive by here, without fail, there'll be somebody, tons of people standing here waiting in line. One of the reasons is, well, it's good, but the other reason is they have do everything through one window here. Most places have an order window and then another window where you go pick up the food. Here, they're taking orders, and when food is ready, they stop taking orders and they pass food through the. Anyway, it's nuts, and the food is good. I have stood in the line twice. I will probably never do it again. I prefer to go across the street, and I recommend this to everybody. A place called Sprague's, owned by a gentleman named Frank Sprague. His lobster roll is every bit as big, every bit as good, priced pretty much the same, even a little bit less than Red's. And plus, at Sprague's, you can get a whole lobster dinner, which you cannot get across the street at Red's. He's also right on the town dock. There's a bunch of picnic tables. It's much more relaxed. There's no line. You can get all the food. And he sits there. He's a real good-natured guy. He watches all these people over there. One time, Katie Couric pulled up and parked on his side of the street, and he ran over. Hey, Katie, how you doing? She said, "Where's the Red's?" And he went, "Oh, it's across the street," and so off. But he said he took it well. He's like, "Whatever, fine." He's a good soul, a great guy, and he does a great job with the seafood. So I not just for that, but I just think it's not worth standing in line across the street when you can go right here and get the same thing even more. Okay, Boothbay Harbor, you probably heard this. This is a pretty upscale part of Midcoast Maine. There are a few lobster shacks along here. Probably the best one is this Boothbay Lobster Wharf. It is a working lobster wharf with a dozen to 15 boats coming in and out all day long. You can see those long pillars it sits on. That tidal differential here is probably 8 to 10 feet throughout the course of the day. Wonderful stuff here. In particular, their cold lobster roll, which is very big, very chunky, a favorite amongst many food writers. And in the upper left-hand corner there is their lobster chowder, which you don't find in many places. Mostly it's clam, as I'm sure you're aware. But definitely worth a stop here if you happen to be in Boothbay Harbor. It's the place I would recommend going to. Okay, another place of interest on the Quid Peninsula, which is one of these peninsulas I was telling you about pointing down here, is the Quid Lobster Cooperative, where it's again 20, 25 lobstermen putting their catch together, selling it on the open market. And you can just come here. They have a little cinder block shack where they deep fry seafood. You can bring your own beer or wine or whatever and sit here and stare out these beautiful inlets that lead out to the Gulf of Maine. And nice way to spend a summer day. Then from the sublime to the ridiculous, here you have Round Pond Lobster, owned by Buddy Poland. This guy's about as Maine as they come. He's a great guy, a wonderful fella, real jokester. When I met him one time there, the first time when I was researching the Lobster Shacks book, I asked for a tour of his building, as you saw. That is what it is right there. It took about 45 seconds, and it was over. There's a couple boiling pots in the back. He's got a cash box, a little refrigerator. And that's it. You bring your own beer or wine. Off to the left there, he's got 4 or 5 picnic tables. He's got a half a dozen lobster boats servicing him, coming in. He sells most of the catch inland, but he keeps some of it right here. All you can get are whole lobster, corn on the cob, and steamers. And that's the extent of it. He's open when he feels like it, but he's a great guy. People love this guy. He has such a huge local following, and a following all over the place. I know a lot of people in Connecticut, this is the one place they love to go to more than any other for whole lobster when they're in the state of Maine. Okay, buddy. Another place worth checking out, just south of Rockland. We're getting close to Penobscot Bay, if you are familiar with Maine geography. McLoon's Lobster Shack is a great spot. Yankee Magazine has been singing its high praises for the last several years. I think it's good. I think it's bordering on great, not the best, but a real cute little place, especially because you can sit and look at a place like this. Look at these little lobster boats bobbing in the waters out here. This is right next door to a young woman owns McLoon's, and her family owns the lobster wholesaling business right across the way, about 30 feet away across a small channel. And she does a great job there. They have a wonderful, cold lobster roll here with a little bit of mayo mixed in, and well worth the visit. Kind of hard to find, but if you're in Rockland, just drive about 10, 15 miles south and you'll come across this place. Lock it into your GPS. Well worth the trip, and the scenery is fantastic. Okay, now we're going to go up the western side of Penobscot Bay, heading in the general direction, ultimately, of Mount Desert Island and Acadia National Park. But before you get there, there's a town of Belfast, which is a fishing town. You come across Young's Lobster Pound, which isn't so much as a shack as it is a warehouse, as you can see. A lot goes on in here. As you can see, once you go inside, these blue tanks hold up to 35,000 pounds of live lobster, which is shipped out all over the world. That's their main business, but when you walk, that staircase going up above leads to a dining area. But on this level that you see right here, right when you walk in the first, into the cavern, right to the right-hand side of the open front door, you can order seafood, and you can get platters of stuff like this. You got lobster, you got shrimp, You have oysters, you have steamers, corn, the whole bit. It's a great place where you can sort of go sit out on the poured concrete dock. They have, probably 40 or 50 lobster boats coming in and out of this place all day long. Okay, then just one more peninsula that we hit before we go over to Mount Desert Island. Blue Hill Peninsula and Bag of Deuce lunch here. This place won a James Beard Regional Outstanding Food Award probably about 15 years ago. They didn't even know who James Beard was or anything like that. And they have the plaque right up next to the cash register there, and they're happy to show it to you. But it's a great place to go, in particular, and sit out here on the Bag of Deuce River, which is kind of reversing falls. It's very tidal. It goes in and out 4 times a day, and enjoy their wonderful, wonderful fried clams, which are very, very tasty. They also have Lobster Roll, but they don't serve whole lobster, but it's a real cute, it's very hard to find this place. You really have to try it. I mean, I've missed it, I searched for it the first time I went there for 2 or 3 hours. So it's not one of the things you're gonna stumble across. You have to wanna go there to get there. Okay, now we're heading toward Mount Desert Island, Acadia National Park. Before you go across the short causeway, that takes you onto Mount Desert Island, you come across this place, Trenton Bridge Lobster Pound. And it's like a lot of the other places in Mount Desert Island, Acadia, and down East Maine. That is, they prepare the lobsters a little bit differently, cook them a little bit differently. As you'll see here, they have these outdoor wood-fed boiling pots with these little chimneys coming out, belching out smoke. You'll see them when you're driving up trying to go, you say, what the heck is going on over here? But what they do is they put big bags of lobsters and steamers and corn in here, for your order, with your little tag on it, and you just sit back and wait for it to be ready to come forth. But a good place to stop, before you go over to the island or after you're coming back if you are feeling a bit peckish. It's a good place to grab a quick bite to eat. Okay, but when you're once here on the island, what you do is you can turn left and go to Bar Harbor. I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, if your seafood is at the top of your list, which it always seems to be for me, go to the right and go down to the extreme southwest corner of the island to Bernard, Maine, on Bass Harbor. There's a beautiful lighthouse there as well, to Thurston's Lobster Pound, which is also right next door to a big lobster fishing operation on the other side of this thing, sort of a 2-decker thing where they serve wonderful lobster dinners, all the fixings, including a piece of blueberry cake in the upper left-hand corner there. Just a great place to look out over the water. And again, this is a BYO place. You can bring your own wine or beer or whatever you want to do. Then in nearby Southwest Harbor, also in the southwestern part of the island, Beale's Lobster Pier. They serve, 3 or 4 different types of lobster rolls here. Here's one I haven't tried yet, spicy buffalo. That just doesn't sound quite right to me. Spicy with, usually lobster's good just by itself. It speaks very well on its own. I did try their Centennial, which had a little bit of dill and a little bit of cucumber. Quite good, I have to say. But normally I'm, just a straight up a little bit of butter, a little bit of mayo, or none at all. Here's our little outdoor dining area with the indoor dining area in the background. And to give a sense why it's called a lobster pier, this is it. The eating area is to the left 25% of the screen there. The rest of it is just a place where they process in, dozens and dozens of lobster boats catching the stuff and shipping it in. To the left, which you can't see here, is a Coast Guard station, a large one, the only one that's out there on Mount Desert Island and in Acadia National Park in the area. But a great place to stop in, have a meal out of doors most of the time. Okay, in Bar Harbor, there are no shacks per se. There might be something pretty close, but this is the closest I could find. Stuman's Downtown, which is a nice restaurant, with cocktails and servers and all that stuff. It sits on a nice, pretty little harbor with a lot of pleasure craft on it. As you can see, here's another one of these strange lobster, wood-fed lobster things here. Get lobster served up here, any kind of deep-fried seafood that you want. The Obama family ate here, I think, 2 years into their first administration, and the Secret Service gave the manager about 20 minutes advance notice that the president and his family were coming. He freaked out. So I can't do anything. And before he knew it, the Obamas were getting off a boat and stepping onto the dock. They sat down at a picnic table at a station where the guy who was to be their server had been there a week. And so he just almost ran from the place. But they put him at ease. They had Barack and Michelle, I think, had whole lobsters, and the girls had shrimp baskets and signed some autographs, and off they went. So happy ending to the story. Okay, we're going to leave the island now. We're getting close to the end here. Not too many more places to visit. We're going to go to a place called Hancock, Maine. This is Wilbur the Lobster. This is Ruth and Wimpy's. This is Wilbur, the 7-foot lobster. Kirstie Alley, who has a house nearby, tried to buy it from them for a 6-figure sum. They wouldn't sell it. It's still there. Now it's leaning on a rowboat at this point. This picture I took several years ago. Kind of a famous thing. This thing was in on the roadway trucking. They do a calendar every year, a monthly calendar with interesting roadside things, and this Wilbur here was Mr. April back in like 2011 or something like that. What a character. But here are Ruth and Wimpy. They're actual people. Wimpy was a truck driver once upon a time. It's a real cool restaurant. They have, beer cans and old model cars and stuff on the shelves. It's just a real humble place. It's only open for probably 7 or 8 months out of the year. And they, again, have one of these funky, wood-oriented, wood-burning, steamers that they use for their seafood cooking. Okay. Now, between here, we're still basically right around, Acadia National Park, a little bit east of there. Between here and the Canadian border, there isn't a lot. It's mostly woods. You'd think it'd be the coastline would be all built up there. It really isn't. It's very rural, very, I won't say undeveloped, but, left, close to its natural state. But if you go all the way to Eastport, which is about as far east as you can go in the United States, Quad Bay Lobster in the town of Eastport is a great little spot. The day I was there, these women were having a nice smiling lunch out here in front of the place. And it's owned by a couple, Brent and Sarah Griffin. Brent is a third-generation lobsterman. Sarah runs the retail operation there, the seafood shack, the Lobster Shack that is, and the seafood market that they have. The stuff here is really great. The lobster here is incredible because the water there is deep. It's cold. Again, that's real key to great stuff. That water there is Passamaquoddy Bay, and that little strip of land that you see over there, that's Canada. So that's the end of the line, really, when it comes to the lobster shack or seafood shack pilgrimage here in America. So leaving you with one parting shot here. Their version of the lobster roll with a big chunk of claw meat on the top. And that is pretty much it. This is how I've spent my life for the last 7 or 8 years in my spare time anyway. And that's just, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it.